Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be looking at a game of quite historical significance here. With the white pieces, we got Garry Kasparov, one of the heaviest hitters of all time. With the black pieces, we got Magnus Carlsen, who was 13 at the time of this game, and who in 2012 today is rated about 28-42 and is about to break. He's on track to break Kasparov's all-time high rating of around 28-50. So this was played in the Reykjavik Rapid in 2004. We got Kasparov white, Carlsen is black here. So I believe this is one of two games they played at Reykjavik here. And Kasparov opening was c4, knight c3, and again Carlsen was only 13, so Kasparov was probably thinking, you know, this Kasparov 28-30 something, 28-40 at the time of this game. Carlsen was about 24-80, so he's probably thinking this little kid probably doesn't know anything about positional chess, so trying to open with a little weird move order, and now going with e4. You know, I guess the idea with e4 is that if c5 or something, maybe now we go to like some kind of English defense or whatever, and sometimes you can even play f4 and knight f3 immediately, or you can just bring the knight to e2, castle, and f4 direct, where white maybe is going to have a little bit of an edge with the move order because he can play f4 and maybe f5 really quick. So anyway, that's, you know, this e4 stuff, and now he just goes d4. And so Carlsen, maybe a little surprising here, when he was becoming a GM back when he was like, you know, 12 years old or whatever, he used to have a very sharp style, and he used to play, he was really known as a pure calculator and all this stuff. So playing the King's Indian here, you know, you wouldn't see him play that these days as he's, you know, the #1 and taking everybody out, just grinding them. But back then, you know, he was a very tactical player. And so what we're seeing here, bishop e2 and now e5. And so Kasparov plays bishop e3, which a lot of times it's possible for black to play knight g4. And we could see this used to be pretty popular, playing like, you know, h5, g5, h4, whatever. But in this game, Carlsen, he captures, and so I believe this is the Gligoric variation, and so it's pretty straightforward. Black has been playing very quickly to develop, get out of the center, and so now with c6, he's playing rook e8 as well in d5, and he's trying to just break it open, just bust it wide open on the e file. And so, okay, white plays f3, and you might be thinking f3 he wants to shore up the e4 square, and really he's trying to make a little dip square for his bishop. And so this is a pretty interesting plan. I believe this is the Taimanov, the Gligoric Taimanov system with bishop to f2 here. And so this is maybe a little surprising that after takes, pawn takes, and now c5. It looks a little goofy right now. And so, you know, because the pawn f3, the bishop on f2, but the bishop's holding it down because it's on a great place. It's holding down the pawn. And, okay, so knight c6. You know, the idea for black here is that he was really trying to jam open on the e-file, right, and you know, play really actively and quickly with his pieces. And this system has become incredibly popular for the white pieces against the Gligoric system with the early c6 and then d5. And the reason for white is that this is so popular is because black positionally is a little bit busted. I mean, this pawn on d5 is isolated. It's very easy for white to attack it. And meanwhile, white has just got the pawn on b4. Maybe he can even jump into d6, you know, some stuff like that. So, I mean, it requires a very high level of precision by black and just simply energetic play to compensate for his long-term strategic negatives. Now, white also has some strategic negatives himself. The pawn on f3, you know, the square f4 is weak, you know, stuff like that. I mean, black has got compensation. In this game, Carlsen, in 2004, he played knight c6. These days, I've even seen Peter's Fiddler, I believe occasionally playing this, you know, sidestepping from his Grunfeld. I believe I saw a recent game with him playing knight to d7, and someone played c6. You know, this stuff gets crazy. So in this position, knight c6, I didn't really like how it turned out in this game. But, you know, there's a lot of choices. You could play the immediate knight h5, trying to jam in the center, although maybe that's going to be kind of sketchy. Let's say if knight to b5, But, you know, I mean, this line is very, very sharp. So knight h5, I think, is an option. Also, I think queen e7 is good. And obviously, knight d7. I think even a6 has been played. Knight c6 by Carlsen here. So, okay. White castles, about time to get the king out of the center. And so knight h5 here by Carlsen. And you know, can't blame the guy. I mean, he's eyeing f4. That's a good square. And so Kasparov is quick to play queen to d2. It's very important to play queen d2 there. If he plays something like, you know, rook c1, something not so attentive, white can actually, or white can find himself in some trouble. Let's say knight f4. Now queen d2 is actually going to lose on the spot. This is a pretty cool tactic in this Gligoric system. Queen g5, simultaneously threatening checkmate, and knight h3, discover attack on white's queen. So this is pretty cool, right? So he plays g3. He's going to lose a queen. Okay, so I just illustrate some danger there for white. So stranger danger. He plays queen d2. So this is a good centralizing move. We you know, take control of some very important dark squares. And now bishop to e5 by Mr. Carlsen. So bishop e5, twofold. Two reasons here. He's trying to secure f4 or provoke weakening with g3. And he's also defending. Maybe this diagonal as d6 square can be important, or even c7. Kasparov, he just plays g3. So again, he really doesn't want to allow the knight in. And so now bishop h3 by Carlsen. He is seizing the initiative with his last couple of moves, with knight h5, bishop e5, and now bishop h3. However, I don't really like black's position, because I feel like these are all superficial threats that Kasparov has now been able to parry successfully, and this is going to be leaving white with just a simply better, just a better position. So, okay, so I'm not seeing a lot of coordination. Although black has provoked g3, this is definitely a weakening move. So here, knight to g7. Okay, this is some goofy stuff. Knight g7. I mean, okay, I understand why he wants to reroute the knight towards the center. If he plays something like, I don't know, let's say rook c8 here, I think he was scared of f4. And let's say you don't want to give up the dark squared bishop. Say if you go back, white could maybe take here. And okay, this looks ugly, but I'm pretty sure that the two bishops here are going to be compensating. And so, yeah, I think the two bishops, you know, all these weak light squares, I think the pawn on h5 is really not that bad. You can even just go to h4 with it. You know, it's no big deal. I think Bobby Fischer showed that a lot of times in the King's Indian, this, you know, taking on h5 and all this stuff is really not that bad. So I think maybe knight g7 was something of an overreaction, and it was probably better for black to play maybe queen d7 here, not scared of ghosts. This, you know, who cares? Whatever, it's double pawns. You know, you got great control over the light squares. You swing this rook to d8 maybe. Now, it's not going to be that easy, but, you know, I think this is something to think about. So instead, black plays knight g7. He's losing a little time here, regrouping his pieces. And so Kasparov just, you know, notice in this game, I mean, Kasparov, 2004, I mean, he was still killing everybody. And right here, he really has barely moved one piece, any of his pieces, more than once. And that's very important because, you know, all of his pieces are very harmonious. Everything's really placed very well, and it's all pointing towards the queen side. Very important. That's where all the plays are going down. The king side, yes, white has incurred some weaknesses. You know, black has created some weaknesses in white's camp, but they're really not that significant, and they're going to take a really long time to exploit. You know, you're going to have to make at least a few moves to start creating some bigger holes. So here with rook c8, I didn't like this move. When I first was going through the game, before I even knew what happened, I was like, rook c8, what does this do? What does it do? And I don't know. You know, it's like putting a little bit of pressure on c5, but that pawn is covered. The bishop on f2 is covering that pawn. So the pressure there is really not significant. I think the rook belongs on d8. You know, so maybe in this position, the best move that I could see, you know, a6 is like a pretty pathetic move to make. You don't want to make this move. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, he could just take here. Now you've got a big weakness on a6. Just pointing, you know, maybe knight to b3, trying to win a pawn here. a6 is pathetic. We don't want to make those moves. What I was thinking was maybe knight e6. And this is actually a pretty logical move. Knight e6 here. it makes a good deal of sense. It's hitting the pawn, not that important. Could be, maybe, but probably not. But it's hitting the d4 square, and most importantly, it's coming to the center. It's bringing the knight to where it belongs in the center. I think if knight to b5 here, you've got either a6 or the immediate d4. I think both of those are going to give black some decent counterplay. And I just think knight to e6, this feels right to me. So okay, so rook d1, Carlsen plays rook to c8, and so knight to b5, and so now we have a pretty solid focal point. A lot of heat coming down on the d5 pawn. It's not easy to defend. Now a6, okay, not a move you want to make, but it's getting difficult to recommend anything better here. What do you do about the d5 pawn? You know, that's pretty tough. I mean, maybe Carlsen should have just tried to sack a pawn here with d4. And I mean, it's not even like a real pawn sack if he takes the pawn. In this position, this would have been awesome for black. Trade off his weak d5 pawn for white's potentially very dangerous c5 pawn. This would have been great for black. Winning. But instead, Kasparov is a wily dog. I don't think he would have taken the pawn. I think he would have let that beef marinate and played knight to e4. And so now knight to e4, the pawn on d4 is not going anywhere. But these knights might be trying to win some exchanges here. And, you know, you can always come back and get these sucker pawns here on d4 later. It's no big deal. So, okay, so a6 was played by Carlsen in the game. d4 was worth considering at least, but a6 was played. And so knight to d6. So Kasparov jumps in, energetic play, should not be a surprise. Now bishop takes. I mean, you can't just give Kasparov an exchange. You don't want to give anyone an exchange. Or b7. Right? The knight on d6 is a monster. It's got to be removed. So he takes it. And so now, if queen takes d6, this was pretty cool. I was looking at it for a second. I was like, why didn't you just take the pawn? I mean, okay, it's not going to be good if he plays like knight takes d5 or something. But then I was like, you know, there's got to be something more to this story. And I believe something like queen to h6 hitting this guy is going to be extremely uncomfortable for black. Queen h6 hitting that, and maybe bishop to f5. Maybe the game is not over, but I think it's going to be pretty tough to play like knight takes here. And white has got a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. So maybe he could have gotten away with taking this. Maybe just knight takes d5 instantly. These things, you know, certainly come into consideration, but you know, maybe even knight e4. There's a lot of tactics flowing around this position, and none of them are going to be good for black. So instead, he tried d4. He tried to give the pawn away, but you know, to trade the dark squared bishop. And so Kasparov knight c4, making life difficult. And in this position, I think black, the only way to hold on, I think, was to play bishop d7, go all the way back, blockade white's pawn. And well, he's probably going to be losing here anyway after something like this. The knight to f6 stuff. I mean, this is tough business, right? This knight on g7 it should be a bishop. It shouldn't be a knight. So what happened in the game? He tried bishop f5, and it looks for a second like, you know, maybe Carlsen's done it here. Maybe he's gotten out of this rough opening. You know, there's a loose opening. Maybe he's going to consolidate, and maybe he's going to be okay. Kasparov with d7. 22 moves, right? d7 is fireworks. And, okay, so let's check the candidate moves, right? White is forking the rooks, so he's got to take the pawn. Queen takes, you lose the queen immediately. It's a knight f6, so that's pretty much a bad candidate move. We can eliminate that. So what does that leave? Bishop takes d7. Okay, so now Kasparov just simply bishop takes d4, and he's just got too many threats in this position. Threatening knight to f6 primarily. The bishop's also a monster on this diagonal. It's threatening bishop c3, opening up this, you know, the pressure along the d file. It's just too much. you know, I mean, at this point, Carlsen wasn't taking steroids or, you know, whatever. So, I mean, what are you going to ask from him, man? He's 13 here. I mean, this is too crazy. Bishop d4, it's done. It's over. Maybe knight here, g4. Maybe, you know, maybe we could say g4. I mean, there's some tactics here, so we can't get careless. Maybe knight here. Maybe you just go back. And or maybe you just play knight d6. I mean, whatever. You know, white is threatening too much stuff. Knight d6 and knight f6. This is just too many threats, I think, in this position. Threatening knight d6, knight f6, the latent pressure on the d file. So Carlsen tried to fight on. He took the bishop, and he played knight f5. So, okay, the kid sacks a piece, but he gets a little bit of play. Queen b6, he plays on for a little bit. But, you know, he's down a piece, and this knight f6, you know, the threats aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So first, rook to d8, snatches, and queen takes b2, and Kasparov just trades queens. Bishop c4. Doesn't want to give up this pawn. That would be a little bit more difficult to win. And here, rook to e3, and Carlsen resigned. So this game was really cool. I mean, we saw Carlsen, you know, I thought it was very interesting. I hadn't studied too many of his earlier games before he was, you know, killing everybody at the top of the world. But it was pretty interesting to me to do a little research on the game and see that his style used to be, he was like a real big calculator and very tactical player. And I thought that was interesting because these days, I mean, he is the definition of a grinder. You know, the guy just plays to get a small, lasting advantage, and he's beating top 10 players and making it look easy. So this was a cool game, and I'm also going to be taking a look at their second game, I believe, from their other game that I could dig up, played also in Reykjavik, where Carlsen came very, very close to beating Kasparov, and he might very well have done so. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.